Margaret Cancorla, Taoiseach, a few weeks ago, the Taoiseach was taking leaders' questions, and I brought up a difficult case in County Roscommon of a youngster that has autism. He basically rips 20 T-shirts a week. He may pull out everything in the fridge at night, cook out and damage the car. And his father was at wit's end. He actually lost his job over it. His father did. And his father was looking for residential care. But unfortunately, nothing has been provided yet. The Taoiseach says he would look into it. He has got all documentation, but I would hope he would. But to make matters worse, Taoiseach, it has come to my attention from people in the Tuam area and Dunmore area of children with different disabilities. In the Children's Disability Network Team 7, they call it, that are 5 years waiting for assessments. There's one child 13 years waiting. A HSE report 23 to 26 has said on the service improvement plan that there's 16,500 children waiting on a service in a service improvement plan. There is 19,000 waiting for an assessment in needs. And we are seeing constantly, and I don't know, is it the west of Ireland or is it all over the country, that children with different disabilities that needs assessment, that needs care plans, there doesn't seem to be the resources, be it speech and language, regardless of what you want, there doesn't seem to be the resources put in place. And there's a major problem because, as you know, for example, with autism, if a child doesn't get the help between 2 and 8, then it is more difficult to be clear about it. And I am asking you and your government, what do you intend to do to make sure our Constitution states that we'll cherish all of our children equally? Well, these children have got a bad deal under this state at the moment with the resources that has been given to them. And with a little help, a lot of those youngsters would be able to go on and fulfill a very normal life. But if we deprive them of the requirements that they need at the moment, it won't do justice to those children down the road. Tomorrow, the parents are forced in Tuam at 12 o'clock to go out and protest about the situation and the way they're being treated. And I am asking you, what will this government do to help those children, those families, because these are mothers and fathers that every day work with their children, want to do the best for them. And I am saying, what will the state do to help those mothers and fathers, and especially those children?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy. And I'm afraid to say that this is a problem all over the country. And I think all of us have had this experience in representing our constituents, meeting parents whose children are waiting far too long for the assessments that they need, and then after that, the therapies that they need. It might vary from area to area or CHO to CHO, but it is a problem across the country and has been for quite some time now. And there are a number of aspects to it. One part of it is the difficulty in recruiting sufficient skilled staff to meet the enormous need that exists. In response to that, we've dramatically increased the number of training places so that more people are trained to take up positions, particularly as therapists and as psychologists, and it may take a little bit of time for that to come on stream, but it will happen. And we've also introduced new assistant grades and changed work profiles, for example, to bring more people into the service. And there is a real difficulty with the assessment of need, because there's a legal right not to therapies, but there is a legal right to an assessment of need. And while that was well intentioned, it's had some unintended consequences. The courts have determined that an assessment of need is a very long process, taking over 30 hours per child. And that means resources that would otherwise be used to provide therapies to children is used on carrying out very long assessments of needs that may not actually be necessary. And that's a real problem that we have to try and work out in some way in consultation with the different NGOs and representative groups. Because if a child needs a particular therapy or treatment, it's often very obvious, and it'd be much better if they could get that right away rather than having to wait for an assessment of need that takes up 2 or 3 days' work for an individual therapist.
Deputy Fitzmaurice.
Taoiseach, what you've said doesn't give great hope for those parents that are waiting at the moment. In fact, I know of parents today that had to go to the other end of the country to pay for basically a consultation on a diagnosis. And that's not acceptable. They've travelled probably 120 or 30 miles to try and get a diagnosis and pay for it themselves, rather than the state basically helping them out. And while it might be a problem right across the country, there is also a problem that I know speech and language therapists, they won't get, a lot of them can't get a full-time contract. They'll get so many hours, but that's it. But there is also the one piece of legislation, the protocol of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And why hasn't the government brought that in to basically put it into law here? Because if you put it into law, it puts a liability on the state to make sure that it gives, you know, the right, it makes the government give the help to those people with those disabilities. It puts a legal onus on them. And will the government be bringing that in?
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. I don't think that parents having to pay for therapies or assessments is the solution, but I understand why a lot of parents have to do that because they're waiting so long. And there is a mechanism now by which the HSE can refund part of the cost of doing that, and we want to expand that during the year. But I don't think on its own is the solution. It might help in some cases, but it is something we're willing to do to refund some or all of the cost where parents are effectively forced to go privately because they can't get the assessment or therapy that they need. Just in relation to the UN Convention, the last government, which I had the honour to lead, ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. It's the intention of this government to ratify the optional protocol, and we will do that. But getting back to what I said earlier, it's a mistake to think that legal rights or UN conventions build houses or provide therapies. They don't. They become another basis for litigation, and very often that ties up the staff resources of the state and the budget of the state in defending litigation and paying damages. So we need to be frank with each other and people about that. Creating legal rights and constitutional rights doesn't train nurses, doesn't build houses, doesn't mean that there are 10 therapists where there used to be 5. And in fact can actually backfire sometimes because time and resources then gets diverted into managing litigation and paying lawyers and paying damages rather than being spent on services.
Thank you. That concludes Leaders' questions.